3 years ago, we started sharing scientific content in favor or compatible with a totally new worldview. Analytic idealism. A growing community of scientists worldwide started sharing their work and insights on our platform, and our sometimes tough but always scientifically rigorous videos attracted a growing audience. And now it's time to celebrate. Welcome all of you to Essentia's YouTube channel, and I'm really happy that we hit 10k subscribers. And I think we did so quite organically, Bernardo. I mean, I joined Essentia now for 3 months, like officially, like full time, but freelance before. And it's been mostly, I think, your work of just publishing essays, setting up YouTube, and somehow drawing the world towards our platform. And it's great, right, that we already have 10,000 people hitting that subscribe button and interested in our content.
Fantastic, and happened pretty quickly after you joined, and it will keep on going, and it's inevitable, it will keep on going.
Okay, we're going to discuss that inevitability of our growth later in this video. And this video is really for you guys, because I think I feel a bit sloppy so far that we haven't been responding as we could to all the questions you guys have been posting in the comment section to our videos. And so I made a selection, and I already also asked you guys to send in questions, and I have a lot of them here on paper. I will ask those to Bernardo, and will range from are bacteria conscious? Can we let the universe learn through our experience of it? What about solipsism? Is it something bad or maybe inevitable also? Stuff like that. So that's coming up in this video. I think first, Bernardo, what's nice also is that people know you as the philosopher and the computer scientist, and you've built a website of your own and have written, I think now 10 books, or?
It's getting to a dozen now.
Exactly, and you are lauded all over the internet as leading the renaissance in analytic idealism. So that's what people know you for. And now, of course, you're also the director of the Essentia Foundation. To just set things clear, how do those two overlap and where are they distinct, those two roles?
Yeah, they are distinct. At the Essentia Foundation, I'm not promoting my own work. The idea of Essentia is to give a voice to scholars, scientists, philosophers, journalists, who are coming to this idea that the essence of nature is mental. It is a form of delocalized consciousness, so to say. It's a field of subjectivity. And that is much bigger than the little work of Bernardo Kastrup. So Essentia Foundation has a much bigger scope. As an entity, I sort of disappear in that. I'm a cog in the machine, if you know what I mean. And then there is my personal writing, which is on the same topic. But today it takes a back seat in my life.
And how does that make you feel? I mean,
it makes me feel great. I never really, I don't know whether I ever said that in public, but you know this because we know each other. But I'm not entirely comfortable with the focus being on myself.
I know.
And I do what I do because it's part of the game. But in the ideal world, I take a back seat to the idealism revolution.
It's good for you guys to know. It took me some effort to get you here on the spot, because many of you know Bernardo is sitting, I mean, you do Zoom interviews like all week, but that's like really in your role of being interviewed as an expert. And I know that you felt somewhat uncomfortable sort of, because you say the roles are distinct, right? I'm the director of Essentia Foundation. I do not want to promote my own work. So I think it's just fair to be really clear about that also in videos like these, that you are here the director of the Essentia Foundation. At the same time, we see that a lot of you guys watching this do send in questions asked towards you, but I think it's just fair to see you then as an expert on idealism in a broader sense, right? And also good to just give a little update on where I am. To me, idealism feels like the best working hypothesis at the moment, right? So I think my position within the foundation is also to seek and but I do it from a belief that I will find truth in this direction and not materialism. But I try to stay open, but it gets harder because you end up in a rabbit hole. So
Yeah.
but anyways, to one of the first questions, we already discussed this before filming, and you mentioned it actually here, that Tudor asked you, I'd like to ask Bernardo about his daimon and if he's getting any peace since his release of another book and having his great website, so your work for Essentia. So, but you already answered that one, right? You feel more peace.
I feel relieved. I felt at the turn of the year that this year I had to write 2 books. It was very clear to me towards the end of last year that my holiday from the daimon was sort of over. And the first one, I just uploaded it for the copy editor yesterday night. So, well, actually today, very early in the morning. So I feel greatly relieved that one of the 2 is in the bag. But yeah, we are almost in September. That means I'm running behind schedule.
And yeah.
So I have to write the second one.
And how does that work? You say the diamond sort of towards the end of last year summoned you to do this, but how does that work? I mean, is there a knock on the door, or is it in your dreams, or how does it sort of enter?
Yeah, I mean, the diamond as an individualized figure is a metaphor.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's not like somebody appears in front of me, but it is a very good metaphor because the diamond is a part of your mind that you don't identify with. It's like it's not you. You think it's thoughts, you feel its feelings, but you don't identify with it because it doesn't care about your egoic agenda, doesn't care about your status, doesn't care about your finances, doesn't care about your bucket list, your dreams, your goals. It doesn't give a damn. It's a force of nature. It's impersonal. It's doing something through you. So the way I relate to it is as a mental force within me, but that's not Bernardo Castro. Now, some people can identify with the diamond and they become completely egoless. Or completely is impossible because they still need to know to which mouth to bring the fork, but largely egoless. I'm not an enlightened being, so I still identify with the ego, and therefore I talk about this other part of my mind that seems so impersonal, that has a plan that I don't understand. I refer to it as a sort of a separate entity because it's easy morally for me to deal with it that way.
Okay.
It's to take distance from it and say, okay, that's not me.
It's sort of a coping mechanism.
It's almost a coping mechanism.
But I mean, how does it relate to the term demon? Like really, because that what it sort of rings to me is that how does it the demon that prosecutes you and just sort of...
The word daimon was the origin of the word demon, but the daimon is not morally committed like a demon is, or like an angel is. The daimon is neutral. The origin of the word is a sort of a... In modern psychology, which began in the late 19th century, the daimon refers to a sort of semi-independent psychic complex, a sort of dissociated part of your mind that's not really fully personalized. It's a sort of a fluidic, impersonal energy, a flow of dispositions and feelings and goals that you register in your mind, but that you don't identify with. When a daimon becomes morally committed, then you can talk of a demon or of an angel, or you can talk of possession and exorcism and this kind of thing. But the daimon has no moral commitment in the same way that a storm has no moral commitment. A storm can irrigate the fields and make sure that your crops don't die and feed the whole village, but it can also destroy your house, flood your house, or lightning can strike your house, or you. And these forces of nature, storms, volcanoes, tsunamis, they are not morally committed. They are morally neutral. They're just
neutral,
nature doing what it does, and that's the daimon.
It's the will of nature. Nice, we'll get back to this when we discuss also free will and the will of the universe. A second one, something totally different from Rue Roughnick asking you a question for Bernardo. It would be interesting to hear you describe how your model of analytical idealism handles the Schrödinger cat scenario. I tried sort of imagining what you would answer to this one, but I'm going to give it to you.
Okay. So,
brief definition for
describe
people.
the scenario.
Yeah, very briefly.
Okay. Yeah. So the scenario is the following. According to quantum mechanics, things only attain defined physical existence upon measurement.
Yeah.
Before you make a measurement, you cannot speak of a defined, localized physical existence or defined physical properties, such as position, speed, direction of movement, spin, mass, and charge, and all these other stuff. Only when you make a measurement do these physical properties become defined.
Yeah.
Before you make the measurement, you can only speak of a superposition of different possibilities, a wave of probabilities, so to say, but not of a defined physical existence.
Yeah.
So if there is a cat in a box and there is an apparatus inside the box that breaks a vial of poison depending on whether a certain atom decays or not, and that decay is a quantum event.
Yeah.
It's not a deterministic event, as far as I know.
Random event, yeah.
Yeah, but random meaning we don't know how it unfolds, so we call it random.
Yeah.
But depending on whether it happens or not, the vial of poison gets broken or not, and therefore the cat lives or the cat dies.
Yeah, exactly.
But if that is in a sealed box, before we look at the box and measure whether the cat is alive or dead, we don't know whether the cat is alive or dead.
Yeah, yeah.
So the cat is in a superposition.
Yeah.
The cat is both alive and dead. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Now, this final part of how the scenario is described, I think, is nonsensical. The cat is not alive and dead. The indeterminacy of nature before a measurement speaks of our inability
to know
what state nature is in before we make an observation.
Yeah.
It's not a statement that nature itself, in some kind of true ontic superposition of all possibilities, and the cat is alive and dead. So I would dispute that.
But it's funny that, sorry to interrupt, but it's funny that I think in an interview with Roger Penrose, he said to me that Schrödinger himself intended this whole thought experiment to show sort of the craziness if you would take it this way, right? So, but then in popular culture, we all see the thought experiment as saying that the cat literally is dead and alive, and that is the implication of quantum theory.
And that has been popularized by the self-appointed spokespeople of science, usually people who don't do any science, just talk about it. Yeah. That the cat is alive and dead, or that particles are both waves and particles. No. Forget about all this. These statements go too far. The data doesn't allow us to make these statements. We have to be more cautious. But in any case, what we do know is that every time we look, we see physical nature, physical between quotes, colloquially physical nature. In other words, the contents of perception.
Yeah, the stable.
Yeah. Every time we look, we see nature in a defined state. Yeah. And we are conscious, and our looking is a conscious process. Yeah. So what we do know is that when conscious beings experience the world around them, that world is in a defined state and not in a superposition. Yeah. Under analytic idealism, all living beings are conscious, including bacteria. I think that question is coming.
That I'm happy to hear.
And so is the cat. So the cat inside the box is experiencing whether the vial of poison was broken or not, whether the atom, radioactive atom, decayed or didn't decay. Yeah. So what is inside the box is not in a superposition. But we from the outside are not aware of that. Yeah. Now the question gets trickier if there is no cat inside the box, but there is a chemical that reacts with the poison and changes color. It can be pink or it can be blue. Depending on whether the vial of venom...
because that chemical is not conscious, so it doesn't know.
It's made of consciousness, but it's not a dissociated, localized form of consciousness that has an internal dashboard of perception. In other words, that doesn't have its own physical world. That has its own physical world. The chemical is not that. The chemical does not have a dashboard. So the chemical has no physical world, because the physical world is what appears on the screen of perception. And now you could ask, is the chemical pink or blue before you open the box and you look. And now you have to say, theoretically, it's in a superposition.
Yeah.
What does the superposition mean? It means that all we can say about it is to assign a probability to it being pink or being blue.
Yeah.
But we cannot speak of its definite state, because pinkness and blueness appear on the screen of perception. And until there is a screen of perception to know what's going on, there is no pinkness and no blueness. You see? But the cat does have a screen of perception. So the cat is either dead or alive, and we just don't know. Now, whether the chemical is pink or blue only becomes a reality when something perceives it. Because pinkness and blueness are contents of perception.
Yeah.
And you cannot speak of pinkness and blueness before you open the box.
So if you would reformulate the experiment this way, you would agree that that's what you're saying, that
Then I would agree that there is a seemingly fundamental limit to our ability to predict or know unmeasured states of non-living nature.
Okay, here's a question from Fine as Frog. Yeah, that's good. To what extent can we know mind at large? To what extent can the dissociative boundary be made transparent? And I'm summarizing, it's a large question. And Fine as a Frog then says, it seems like the inner traditions, such as religion and philosophy, are a way towards knowing this mind at large. And then we have, of course, the outer science as in this question. And the question then is also, how can this sort of inner knowing that religions and traditions like that describe and our scientific methods somehow be bridged? But that's sort of a secondary question. But the first one, can we know mind at large?
I'll give several answers. They are complementary. One is, everything you know, everything you can possibly know is mind at large, because there's nothing but this universal subjectivity. Now, there's another way to define mind at large as the activity of universal consciousness that is outside your particular outer. Can we know that? Yes, every time you look around and you see the world around you, that's how the activity of mind at large presents itself to you on your internal dashboard, the screen of perception. So there is a sense in which everything you can possibly know is mind at large. But of course, what the questioner is hinting at is, can you know the mental activity outside you from a first person point of view, as opposed to a second or third person point of view? To a limited extent, probably. I think for as long as we are alive, we are dissociated from the rest of the activity of universal consciousness or mind at large, because that's what life is. Life is what the dissociation looks like. But no process in nature is absolutely perfect. When it stops raining, the ground doesn't dry immediately. When something catches fire, the fire doesn't consume everything that is combustible. No process in nature is absolutely perfect. And it stands to reason that neither is dissociation. So we are not completely dissociated from the activity of mind at large from a first-person perspective. Something must trickle in. Something must percolate through. And we call it intuition, we call it psychic abilities.
Near-death experiences.
Well, in near-death experience, the dissociation is being impaired, right?
So that's as close as we can get, you think, to experiencing mind at large then?
I think if you stop your heart and brain metabolism stops, you're impairing the dissociation and stuff will come through both ways. If you take psychedelics, which impair brain activity, they reduce brain activity, you make the dissociative boundary permeable, porous. But can you do that on the natch with meditation alone or spiritual practice? According to the world's great traditions, yes. I can't as a person, but I'm humble enough.
Have you tried? I mean, you always say you don't have sort of a gift for meditation.
No, I'm very hard-headed.
You
it's hard like stone. I need a lot of stuff to get off my baseline of consciousness. I may need chemicals, psychedelics, a mind machine, or an audio machine,
Yeah.
or I may need to wake up in the right mood.
Mm.
I can't do it on a natch like that.
Very
No.
strong dissociation here. Yeah.
Very, very. My mind is very folded in upon itself.
Yeah.
I'm very metacognitive,
Yeah.
which is good for certain things, like doing philosophy, writing philosophy,
And
analytic
for
philosophy.
analytic philosophy and
Yeah.
analytic idealism is perfect.
Yeah,
So,
and
but-
computer engineering.
But does it, is it sometimes also you sense? I can imagine coming from to it from this analytical perspective and your strong mind, that you can also long for the more direct experience, right?
Oh, I
And,
do.
Yeah, is that sort of a form of suffering for you in the
Yeah,
sense that
of-
you can get there with your head, but you see these other people who just live it?
I don't suffer anymore
Okay.
because I don't. I mean, the grass is always greener at the neighbors, and that's a universal human experience, and I am no exception. But I've come to a point in my life where I accept myself and my limitations. I know that there are certain things that are not in the cards for me.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly okay with it today. But when I was younger, yeah, I struggled. Now,
Yeah.
Bernardo Kastrup is not the person Bernardo Kastrup wanted to be.
Yeah.
But now that I know I'm not Bernardo Kastrup, I'm perfectly okay
Yeah,
with
all right,
this.
yeah. I sort of recognized it when I was more, I was brought up Christian. My dad was a minister. So I always wanted to experience that direct religious experience, and I could just not get there somehow. And I tried all techniques that the religion I was in sort of gave you, just going to large events and singing pop songs about Jesus and trying to just get there, and then it didn't work for me. So I know that sort of pain, and also only through psychedelic substances that I sort of first got there. But what also I found interesting to sort of translate a bit to people who might be more in a panpsychist camp, and I know you critique that a lot, but everything you say, let's say that everything has consciousness, but more in a panpsychist way. So let's say there are consciousness particles in this table, and it's a different, more lower level consciousness than ours, but it is conscious. What we then are saying, could it be that experiencing that light mind at large is then just wanting to experience being all matter in the universe at once? So you know what I'm trying to get at? Because I think people can relate to that. Panpsychists can, perhaps.
Well, if you look at the linguistic origin of the word, panpsychism. Psychism is mentation.
Yeah.
And pan is everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
So mentation everywhere. If you interpret it in this very generic way, then I am a panpsychist.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that everything has mind. I think everything is mind. And therefore, mind literally is everywhere.
Yeah.
But what we in the culture normally refer to as panpsychism is something that attributes to this mind the structure of subatomic particles. So mind is itself fragmented into little centers of awareness, gazillions, countless of them, distributed across space and time. That is what I think is nonsensical. Matter is not conscious. Matter is an appearance in consciousness of conscious activity.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a presentation of consciousness to itself.
Yeah.
From across the dissociative boundary.
Yeah. But can you now feel this? I mean, it's. I know you now for 3 years, and I know this intellectually, and it starts to sink in that I'm starting to sort of really feel, okay, I'm looking here at the universe, thinking, and that presents itself to me as Bernardo sitting here, right? It's the mentation of the universe. I'm sort of, but it's just the abstraction of it, But I do find it a better position than sort of materialists.
Okay, I'll say something, see if it helps. Panpsychism is based on attributing to nature a structure that exists only in language. When we speak of things, like this is a fist, it's a thing.
Yeah.
We think there is a fist in nature because we have a word for this.
Yeah, yeah. We made a model, a mental model, a word. Yeah.
We refer to it and give a label to it, and we think it's a thing.
Yeah.
And now you have to ask yourself, is my fist conscious? That's what the panpsychist does. But of course, where's the fist? Disappeared. Violated the law of conservation of energy.
Yeah.
Right? The fist disappeared. And the same, you can say the same about everything.
And we know this for matter, right? At the sum, I mean, that this is just quantum theory. We know that then the matter disappears in a sense, and we get to sort of the quantum where we have a fields. And
But that's the thing. What disappears are the particles, but particles are not things. Particles are ripples in the field.
yeah,
That the ripple changes shape doesn't break any law of conservation. But if you call a certain shape of the ripple one particle and another shape another particle, then particles decay in such a way the first particle disappears and the other one pops out of nothing. But that's a wrong understanding of what's going on. There are no particles. Particles are just a metaphor for particular patterns of excitations of quantum fields. But to help you go down this line of thought, before we go to particles, let's talk about this chair. Is this chair conscious? Okay, is there a chair to begin with? That's the question you have to ask. Before you ask, is the thing conscious, you have to ask, is there the thing? Because this is metal and this is leather. What if I cut the seams and remove the leather? Where's the chair? Is the chair now conscious? But there is no chair now, and now is the metal conscious? But okay, these are two soldered pieces of metal. What if I cut them and break them in two? Now are both pieces conscious? And or was the original one the only one that was conscious? Is the Amazon River conscious? But where does the river end and the Atlantic Ocean begin? So we replace the structure of reality with the structure of language, which is what leads us to ask stupid questions like, is the apple conscious? Is my thermostat conscious? Now the panpsychist understands this. So the panpsychist says, okay, now we have to divide everything as far as we can until we cannot keep on dividing them. Not only the leather out of the metal,
so we go
but
subatomic.
one molecule from the other, and then take the molecules apart, and then take the atoms apart, and then take the subatomic particles apart. And then you end up with the elementary subatomic particles, like quarks, gluons, electrons, and bosons, and all this stuff, right? And they think that you cannot go further. And now they say the electrons are conscious. And I can't play my trick anymore because I can't divide the electron. But that too is a vast misunderstanding of physics. For the past 80 years at least, if not 100, we have known that there are no particles. In the same sense that there is no ripple separate from the lake that ripples. You cannot fish a ripple out of the lake. There's nothing to the ripple but the lake. In the same, exactly the same sense, there is nothing to a particle but the underlying quantum field being excited.
But do they then play sort of a dualist game also, you think, in panpsychism, that you want to attribute sort of the quality of awareness of consciousness to matter? So you play a dualist game also, right? Because you want to uphold sort of materialism, but then you see the hard problem of consciousness, and now you just say, oh, there must be this consciousness particle. But it seems to me like a dualism in a sense.
We have, in our culture, especially scientific culture, we have this delusion that since the Enlightenment, science has made steady forward progress, monotonic progress. That every step on the way, although ultimately wrong, was a step forward, helped us see something,
progress.
Helped us progress. Now, Thomas Kuhn has already destroyed this naive view. In 1963, with the third edition of Scientific Revolutions. That's not how things go, but our mentation sort of begs us to validate even our mistakes, to give ourselves this reassuring, comforting notion that we are making monotonic progress. We are always taking steps forward. So physicalism is obviously wrong. But it was a step forward, and now we take the next step. We just say consciousness is in all matter. The problem is that this contradicts physics. It contradicts the very evolution that we are trying to hold on to. Let me make this alive to you, Hans. Let me list a couple of things that we know are facts and would be magic if we think of particles as marbles, as opposed to ripples on a field. Particle decay would be magical. The Higgs boson decays, it can decay into a number of things. One of the possibilities is it decays into 2 muons, or heavy electrons. But the Higgs boson is not made of muons. there aren't two muons in a Higgs boson. How can it decay into two muons? Because then the Higgs boson disappears into nothing and two muons appear out of nothing. That's magical.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what happens. The Higgs boson is an excitation of the Higgs field. That excitation can decay just like a ripple can decay. A ripple can become less tall, it can lose energy, it can go through an obstacle and break into other ripples with different frequency. It gets other physical properties. Now, the muons are the names we give to ripples with other physical properties.
Yeah, yeah.
Another example, what people call the quantum foam, particles popping in and out of existence spontaneously. That would be magical if particles were marbles, because now you have things, marbles, popping into existence out of nothing and disappearing into nothing without a trace. Well, that's not what's happening. What's happening is the underlying quantum fields are self-excited and they form ripples, and those ripples decay back into nothing. But nothing appears or disappears because the ripple is not a thing. The ripple is a behavior of the lake.
Yeah.
When the ripple disappears, nothing disappears. It's just that the lake stopped doing something.
Yeah.
I stopped doing the fist.
Yeah.
Did the fist disappear? Nothing disappeared. Something that I was doing before, now I'm no longer doing.
Yeah.
The same for this quantum foam. The underlying quantum fields do some things, and other times they stop doing them.
Yeah.
We call that particles appearing and disappearing, but there are no particles. There are only ripples. I could go on and on.
I know, and I like it. But I think for me, if you want to just make it sort of really like a basic message to me, it's just like saying that in idealism, we just say that that ocean is consciousness, right? The ocean is the mind at large. You can agree with that, on that?
Yeah, but I mean, assuming that we'll eventually unify the 17 quantum fields that we have today in the grand unification theory, then I would say the resulting field is a model of this field of subjectivity that is the ground level of nature.
Exactly, yeah. And then I can sort of follow, and that helps me also, people have now lost it, that somehow, to me it's just that all we really know is that we are conscious, and that sort of hit me when I first met you and we did a documentary on the artificial intelligence being able to become conscious or not, that you said no one has ever seen an electron, right? It's just within consciousness we build these models, and then reality appears to us as if there is a electron, and that stuck with me. So now it feels like just a very sane, basic position to say all I know is that I have consciousness, and then all else is abstraction, right? In a sense, or model making.
Yeah, convenient fiction.
Yeah.
We can detect single electrons. We can detect single photons.
Yeah.
It hits a photomultiplier, we amplify that signal electronically, and we get something on a computer screen. In fact, we can even see single photons under the right conditions, when the light is very low. But the photon that we refer to is a theoretical entity. It's a model of the experience of seeing the output of a photomultiplier, or of seeing a little thing blink in your retina under certain light conditions. And all of science is based on these theoretical entities that are convenient fictions. The world or nature behaves as though these fictions were true, until it doesn't. And then we replace the convenient fictions with other ones. For instance, Newton proposed the convenient fiction that there is an invisible force called gravity pulling celestial bodies to one another invisibly and at a distance and instantly. And it took the French about half a century to stop laughing of this mystical idea of these invisible forces pulling things towards one another. But we know how that ended. And yet, in the early 20th century, Einstein showed that there is no such force. There is no such invisible force at all. It's the equally invisible fabric of space-time bending and twisting that leads to the effect we call gravity. Yeah. And guess what? Loop quantum gravity is unraveling that. There will be another convenient fiction now. So the history of science is the history of the evolution of convenient fictions. Accounts, models of experience. But what really is there, the givens of nature, pre-theoretical givens, are experiences.
Yeah, that's what we really know. But so also this applied to your own model then, right? That you say it's a convenient, can you say that on your own model, to your own model as well, as being a convenient fiction?
Of course.
Yeah,
because the moment I use the word consciousness, I am objectifying what is purely subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm making it a thing. And I go further. I talk about this universal field of subjectivity that is spatially unbound.
Yeah.
I'm giving it extension because I know that people can only think in terms of extension. In other words, in terms of things that have a size in space or a duration in time.
Yeah.
But subjectivity has no extension.
Mm.
No. How many centimeters does your thought have?
Yeah.
How many yards does your emotion have?
Yeah.
So of course I'm talking in terms of convenient fictions because otherwise I can't communicate.
Yeah.
But what is ultimately modeled has no extension. It's not a field. It's not even a thing. It's that within which experiences arise.
This one comes from Sarah Svatikuli, 1035. Bernardo, I love your work and your theory. I have a question though. You have argued that consciousness does not depend on matter or bodies or brains, by in part reciting numerous studies that show cognition and consciousness are not always correlated to brain neuroactivity. So consciousness cognition doesn't need a brain, right? Brains are just what show up on our dashboards. We discussed that extensively. So why then do you posit that metacognition is dependent on brains, specifically human brains, or possibly some other biologically evolutionary object? So if I had to sort of phrase this question, it's about your relationship, the relationship between your theory and biology, and that you place such an emphasis on biology.
Yeah.
First, I think important to define metacognition. What are we talking about?
So cognition is the ability to perceive, to feel, to cognize things, to know things.
Yeah.
Metacognition is our ability to turn the contents of our own mind into objects of knowing. Is to know that we know. Is to know that we experience. Is to think about our own thoughts.
Yeah.
To ponder our own emotions. Metacognition is what happens when mind sort of turns in upon itself to investigate, evaluate its own contents, its own activities.
Yeah. People hear somewhere, it's your nice cat joining in. No, it's alive. But she refers to the metacognition, the necessity of brains for metacognition.
When we formulate things this way, our brain is needed for metacognition. We are thinking dualistic terms, almost materialistic terms, as if the brain were the means for a certain configuration of mind, a metacognitive configuration of mind. I'll try to frame it in a different way that is more consistent with what I'm trying to put forward. Matter, all matter, is always the dashboard representation of mental activity. And therefore also a dashboard representation of certain configurations of mentation.
Yeah.
Metacognition is a configuration of mental activity.
Yeah.
What that configuration looks like when observed from the outside, from across a dissociative boundary, is a human brain.
Yeah.
A human brain is what metacognition looks like when observed from across a dissociative boundary.
Yeah.
And that's why the two come hand in hand. One is the image of the other.
Yeah.
One is not the means or the generator or the origin of the other. One is simply what the other looks like.
Check.
You see?
But, yeah, I get this. So that, but then that's the only form of metacognition we know of from a first-person perspective, right? We experience metacognition. I have a feeling, a sense of how it is to sit here with you, right? A form of metacognition. And I know that if I look in the mirror, that looks like Hans and it has brain, and you also have that. So I also apply that to you, and I do not apply it to this table, which I don't have a first-person access to. But theoretically, I mean, would it be possible that other forms of configurations in our universe are metacognitive that we know of, that don't know of? So the sun, the moon, we don't know, yeah.
There are infinite things we cannot disprove. Right?
Yeah.
I cannot disprove the flying spaghetti monster. It may be hiding in a higher dimension, moving the planets around the sun with its invisible noodly appendages. I cannot disprove that. If you lose your shoes tomorrow, you cannot disprove that aliens came to your house and stole it and went away and never left a trace. So the game is never whether we can disprove something. Because there are a great many totally nonsensical things that we cannot disprove. I cannot disprove that there is a teapot right now in the orbit of Saturn.
I know, but you're exaggerating now a bit, because what I want to get to is sort of, do you agree that there can be metacognition on other levels than...
I cannot disprove it.
Yeah.
But the question is, do we have good reasons to think that that might be the case?
Yeah.
That's the only productive
Okay, and you think
question.
we don't?
I think we don't.
Okay,
No.
check.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. We know we are metacognitive.
Yeah.
We know we evolved.
Yeah.
We know that there are other living beings on this planet that have smaller brains or maybe
Yeah,
no
yeah.
nervous system at all, and their behavior doesn't betray metacognition.
Yeah.
When you're metacognitive, you start doing the thing called culture and civilization.
Yeah.
And
Politics,
elephants, they still haven't done that. Neither did whales.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So there's an excellent reason to believe that metacognition is the apex of the evolutionary line,
Yeah.
and that bacteria are not metacognizant.
Yeah.
And
And neither are stars that sort of preceded
I'll
us.
get there. I'll get there. So
That's we want to get to the stars.
If metacognition were woven into the very foundational fabric of reality, in mind at large itself, bacteria would have it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that it took 4 billion years of bloody evolution with a lot of pain and death for a thing, an entity in nature to arise whose behavior betrays metacognition. Here are we with our civilization, our wars, our technology. So I don't think we have any good reason at all to think that metacognition is built into the very field of subjectivity. It's a configuration of it that evolves over time at great cost. Now, are stars metacognizant? The first question is, are stars even dissociated alters? Do they have a private inner life of their own? I don't think we have good reasons to think they have, because they're completely different from the one instance of private inner life that we know, which is metabolism. Metabolizing creatures seem to have private inner life. My cats betray they have. Their behavior betrays private inner life, similar to ours. And if you look at their physiology under a microscope, it's identical to ours. Protein folding, mitosis, all that good stuff that metabolism does. You can find that in amoeba. So I would think that nature has given us reason to think that living beings have private inner life.
Yeah.
A star looks nothing like a living being. A star looks nothing like a living being. The argument for the star being conscious, I think it comes from Rupert Sheldrake, a person I respect.
He's working on that,
He compares the patterns of electromagnetic field activity in the star to those in our brain, and they say they're equally complex. This is not nonsensical, but I personally consider it a stretch.
Yeah. But to answer Sarah here, it is very important to make the distinction that it is not our brains that lead to metacognition, but it's how it looks like
it's what
in
the
universe,
looks like.
in our universe. And in that sense, I can follow you that it is sort of most likely that it looks like that, metabolizing.
You see, people always, even when they are idealists, they tend to think in materialist
or
dualist terms.
It's just...
Like, is the brain needed for metacognition? That's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, what does metacognition look like?
This one, this is a question from Greensleeves 7165, and I really like it. It's not clear how the gains of the harvest can be banked if universal consciousness outside of life is not capable of metacognition. And with the gains of harvest, this Greensleeves is referring to sort of our personal experience, our metacognition. How can that sort of contribute to universal consciousness? Can it be banked, stored in the universe? Can the universe learn from our experience, Bernardo?
So where this comes from is the notion that if we are dissociative segments of this one field of subjectivity in nature, when we die, our private mental contents, our learnings, our experience, our insights, our memories, they don't disappear. They become reintegrated into this broader field because death is the end of the dissociation. If life is what dissociation looks like, then death is the end of the dissociation. And therefore, the contents of our private inner lives are contributed to the whole of nature because the dissociative boundary that disappears. Now, if mind at large out there is not meta-conscious, how can we contribute to that?
That's the question.
Now, when we speak of meta-conscious, we are speaking of the capacity to form metacognitive insights.
Mm-hmm.
It's the capacity to generate metacognitive insights.
Yeah.
I don't think mind at large, beyond living beings, has that capacity to generate its own metacognitive insights, like these insights of self-awareness that we get throughout life, especially if we suffer. But when we die, those insights, we already have them. They are already committed to memory. Because we as dissociated authors, we do have that capacity. So we have formed those insights throughout life. And when we die, we contribute the insights to the rest of nature. Nature doesn't need to have the capacity to generate new ones because it's already getting the metacognitive insights from us.
From the dissociation process, it sort of started itself.
So, for instance, you don't have a furnace at home. So you don't have the capability to melt metal and buy and create a wedding ring, right? You don't have a furnace. You don't have the capability to forge and create a wedding ring in your home. Your home doesn't have that capability. But you can go to a shop and buy it, and you still wear a wedding ring. So the fact that you don't have the capability doesn't mean that when the thing is gifted to you, that it has no value. We gift the metacognitive insights. We give the ring to nature. Now, nature without us doesn't have the capability to make it, but it doesn't need to. It's already getting it.
And then it can sort of, because that's not metacognition, it can enjoy or have pleasure in sort of receiving that ring.
It will have the full insight, the full experience of it. What it will not be able to do is to generate the next one.
Or to reflect on that. Could it somehow, because that's the learning process of the universe, that this is sort of just me, what I find beautiful in idealism is that I think my experience of my life, whether suffering or pleasure, just the conscious experience of my life does contribute to a learning process. But this is maybe a word I want to ask you if that's correct. If the universe can somehow learn through my personal experience that is sort of then stored and cannot metacognitively reflect on it, but can it learn from it somehow?
What you learned is what it will know.
It will then know that,
That's where the metaphor of the ring breaks. What it's getting from you is not a thing, it's a direct first-person insight. For instance, when you dream, you have certain thoughts in your dream. And a dream is a dissociative state. You identify only with your dream avatar, not with the rest of the dream. The houses, the other people, the trees, the cars. And yet, all of that is actually you. But during the dream, you are dissociated, so you think you're only your dream avatar, and you have thoughts during the dream. Now you wake up, your dream avatar is dead. The dissociation ended, your dream avatar is dead. It's gone, it's toast. Right? But you still remember the dream. From the avatar's point of view. So what the avatar knew, you now know because it was you all along. Same thing with death.
But I guess but I guess my question then is if the dreamer, so the universe dreaming all of this, can somehow take this knowledge into a new dream that sort of builds on it, like say, okay, this was like a nightmare. I'm referring to just a tragedy.
What else is it doing?
Check. But it has a will to sort of progress this sort of dreaming or think, okay, this was a nightmare, sort of this, just the tragedy we had in sort of the human history. Second World War, the Holocaust, stuff like that. Could the universe sort of bank that experience and see sort of the sheer, that it was like a pure nightmare and somehow think, okay, we gotta dream this differently next time.
The line of thought you went through there is a metacognitive line of thought. It's when you're sort of separating yourself as subject from your experiences, evaluating them, passing value judgment on them. This was good, this was not good, I want this or I don't want this next time. This is all metacognitive stuff. In the mind of nature, I think the game is instinctive. There is a will, but it's what Schopenhauer called a blind will. In other words, a non-metacognitive will. It's the spontaneous will of a kid. The spontaneous will of an animal, It's not pondered.
And it remains that. It cannot evolve into a metacognitive will.
It can. I see no reason why it couldn't, but we are talking here not only about the geological timescales, we are talking about cosmic timescales.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, from our point of view as living beings, it's not changing.
You and I are not gonna. Yeah, we're not gonna see a conscious universe that's sort of magna-cognitive. Okay, but that's already nice. I can live with that. If you say in theory it's possible, I like that. I mean, it's just a beautiful idea. I think.
I think that's where it's leading to.
Yeah.
Outside time, it has already happened.
Yeah. So the universe then knows, not metacognitively, but it knows what we give it, sort of our metacognitive experience of our lives. So it can then know that. But interesting is how that, what the mechanism of that process is. We know how it looks like because that's us dying and just our matter sort of dissolving into dust. And we know that physically, chemically. But in idealism, what's the mechanism you think?
Why do you refer to it as a mechanism? What are you alluding to when you use the word?
Yeah. More dummy. It's just are my thoughts somehow stored in a sort of cosmic?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
understand. Memory. Is there physical
are they
trace
stuck
of
here when we die? They just the universe can then sort of they are uploaded to the universe in computer metaphor.
So where can we find it in the physical world?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if memories are in our neurons, when we die, those memories are
they
now
need to go to the universe.
Where is it? Where is it?
Yeah. How are we going to do that?
Which configuration?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to upload that.
So
without computers, how are we going to upload it?
Yeah. So the key premise of your question is that memories are to be found as physical traces in a brain. That's the key premise.
Yeah.
Because if there is a perceivable physical correlate of memory, in other words, if memories look like something in the physical brain, then memories should look like something in nature at large if nature inherits our memories when we die. Right? So, but let's review this key premise. We have been trying to find physical correlates of memory in our brain for over 100 years now. A lot of money has been invested. And so far, it has led nowhere.
Nothing.
Despite headlines saying that, there was a headline a few years ago, scientists have found how memories are stored in the brain. That was the headline of a press release issued by a major university. I forgot the name, I forgot which one. And you read the scientific paper, what they did was the following. People were instrumented with electrodes, needles going into their brain to measure the activity of individual neurons. They were asked to watch a movie, and then activity was measured.
Yeah.
Then they took the TV away, and then the same people were asked to remember the movie in their mind's eye.
Yeah.
And they measured brain activity.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, the two patterns of brain activity were more or less the same.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the study.
Yeah.
Does it say anything about memory? Not at all.
No.
Because the question is, how does the brain know which neurons to reactivate during recall? Where is that information stored? The paper said nothing about it. Speculation is rampant. There are people who say memories are interneuronal processes, taking place across many neurons. Others say it's intraneuron. It's a sort of interplay between the cytoplasm and the nucleus of the neuron. Others say it's within the microtubules.
Yeah, there's Penrose and Hameroff, right?
Yeah. Quantum processes in microtubules. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, what does experimentation tell us? There are experiments with rat brains being cut down to 90% off, and the rats still remember things, what they have been trained. But these are old experiments. There is a more recent one, 2013. They trained planaria, little flatworms, which have a small brain in their head. They trained planaria to navigate a complex environment to find food. Took weeks, but the planaria learned how to find food, navigate in that complex, irregular environment. Now, planaria is unique in that if you cut off a part of their body, they grow it again, even their head. So they decapitated the trained planaria and waited several days for a new head to pop. They put the planaria in the same environment. Lo and behold, the planaria remember exactly how to find food.
And what's your sort of, how do you account for that?
Under analytic idealism, matter is an image of mental processes. It's what mental processes look like. Matter is not the cause of mental processes.
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference in implications between that and materialism? Under materialism, matter is the cause of mental processes.
Yeah.
So there cannot be anything about mental processes that you cannot trace back to matter.
Yeah.
Because matter is the cause.
You take away the cause, you take away the brain of the worm, and it's gone.
Whatever you find in mental processes, you have to be able to trace back to material arrangements.
Yeah.
Because under materialism, there is nothing to mental processes but material arrangements. Under idealism, matter is an image, not the cause. Images are not complete. My body is an image of my mental inner life. You can't see my back. You can't see what's under my t-shirt. You can't see what is under my skin. There's a whole lot of things that you can't see because images are not necessarily complete. Images don't necessarily tell everything there is to be told about the phenomena they are images of. Memory doesn't seem to be part of that image. Now, our mental activity presents itself to us in its present state. But memories don't seem to be part of that image, of that appearance, in physicality, in materiality, under quotes, colloquially meant. Which under analytic idealism is perfectly okay. Images do not need to be complete. Images can be partial. And evidence indicates that you can't find memories in brain activity, which is perfectly okay. Not everything needs to have an expression in the image of the phenomenon. The image doesn't need to be complete.
Yeah, could it be like a totally different image under idealism, that sort of those memories have a different image in nature that we not know yet of? Or
if memories do not have a physical correlate, in other words, if all of our mental activity, memories don't seem to show up in what our mental activity looks like.
Exactly.
Only the recall, when you access the memory and you replay,
then we see the brain activity again. Yeah.
But the memory itself doesn't seem to be part of the image. If memory is not presented physically in the case of living human beings, it stands to reason that it probably doesn't present itself physically when it comes to the memories of nature. There is something about the temporal aspect of memory that doesn't percolate through to the appearance, to the image. The recall, yes, but the information itself doesn't seem to have a physical correlate. Certainly not in planaria, and also not in rats. Same experiment was done in rats.
And I know it's just, again, image talking, because that's sort of our disclaimer. Anytime we now use sort of physical examples, they're images of, right? They're not the thing in itself, but could those memories, because people are interested in psychic abilities, people accessing thoughts of other people, knowing stuff, could it be that memory somehow physically is represented in a form we do not yet know of, in a field or electromagnetic fields? A lot of people work on this or think about this. It's just psi, and we don't like it, most scientists, but...
Yeah, we have good data on memory access. We know what is needed for memory access.
Yeah, exactly.
For instance, something goes wrong with your hypothalamus, memory access becomes difficult or impossible. So access to memory has physical correlates. But the information that is accessed doesn't seem to have. And why am I saying that? Well, the Planaria experiment of 2013, many experiments done with the dissection of rats' brains over many years before. Phenomena like terminal lucidity, in which patients of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia during their life, they forget everything, just to remember everything and be completely lucid hours before dying.
That's strange. This is a known phenomenon?
It's a known phenomenon. People can look it up. It's called terminal lucidity. There is strong suggestion that there is no physical correlate of the information itself that is accessed through recall. We like to think of memory according to the favorite technological metaphor of the day. So in our case,
Yeah.
because we have computers
Hard
and we
drives.
have flash drive sticks that we
Yeah.
can put in a computer and
Yeah.
see our photos again, we like to think of memory as physical traces encoding information
Yeah.
somewhere in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to hold any water
Mm.
because terminal lucidity, planarity, remembering
Yeah,
their
yeah.
training after their heads are cut off and their nervous system is in their heads.
Yeah.
It's not distributed across the body.
Yeah.
Of experiments with rats' brains or our inability to find memories in the brain
Yeah.
after having tried for 100 years.
Yeah.
So memories don't seem to have a physical correlate. And this makes sense, Hans, if you think about it. All that we can see in the physical, colloquially physical world around us, all that we can measure are present states. Even the light that we see with our telescopes that was emitted millions of years ago, and every star we see it's a past event,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the photons that hit the lens and the sensor of the telescope, those photons are present states of nature. And that's what we are seeing. We are seeing a present state that, oh, the photons were emitted millions of years ago, so they correlate with a past state. Okay, but what is being seen is a present state. What is physically measurable is always a present state. And yet the past and the future are as integral to nature as the present. We know that from Einstein's blocked universe and the latest developments in loop quantum gravity. Past and future are real, but we can see them. They have no physical correlate. Can we make a measurement of the charge of a past state?
But so if you say like it's present, if we measure it, then if we recall a memory, it somehow is present again. But philosophically, what are we saying then? Are we really bringing the past into presence again, or?
The metaphor of memory as present states stored somewhere has failed. It's not sustainable. People still believe because they need funding for their research programs, so they still insist on that. But that program has failed. So memories are not present states. So what are they? They are a mental form of direct access to past states that have no physical correlates, because no past state has a physical correlate. Whatever physical states you can measure are present states. They may have been set up in the past, but they then persist in the present. Really past states that didn't persist have no physical correlate. Where is the past? Can you give it to me? Hand me the past.
Yeah.
Hand me the future. You can't. And so memories in alignment with this notion seem to be simply past states. And therefore, they have no physical correlates. When you recall, you're literally reaching back in time. Because mind can do that. And how can mind do that? It's a miracle. No, it's no miracle. The blocked universe tells us that as far as causality is concerned, as far as any parameter that we associate with existence is concerned, the past exists and the future exists. It's one block universe. The present is just a slice of that long loaf of bread.
Yeah.
That
And
slice,
it all exists simultaneously, right?
well, it all exists outside time.
Yeah.
To say simultaneously is to say that it happens at the same time. But that's not what I'm saying.
It's outside
It's
of time.
outside time.
But this one is but just one step back. So you were saying it's to recall the past is to, it's a past state, you say, and only present states can be sort of a physical.
Perception and causality is a slit on this big loaf of bread that is the block universe. And that slit is imposed by our biology, because it's the way we organize our data about the world and not become completely overwhelmed and therefore unable to maintain a form of coherence.
Yeah.
There is this metaphor of Alan Watts that explains this perfectly. Imagine that you're sitting in front of a wooden fence and you can't see the other side, except for a little slit that remains open between the wooden panels. There is a slit.
Yeah.
And you can see just through that slit.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, a cat walks along. So through the slit, you see first the cat's head, and then a little moment later, you see the cat's tail.
Yeah.
And every time the cat walks by, you first see the head, and then
Yeah.
you see the tail.
Yeah.
If you didn't know better, you would say the head causes the tail.
Yeah.
The
That's
head
interesting,
is
yeah.
the cause of the tail.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
time the head is perceived, shortly thereafter I perceive the tail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is what causality is when you can't see the whole pattern, because you'd be cognitively overwhelmed, when you can't see the cat. You can only see a slit through that big loaf that is the block universe.
Yeah.
When the head is perceived and then the tail, we say the head causes the tail. That's what causality is. Causality is a slit-like partial view of the states of nature. They all exist outside time.
Yeah, and can our whole life story, if we say the cat is our whole life story in a sense, is that sort of, do you...
There is only the tapestry of existence. But because we scan that tapestry through a slit, the regularities of the tapestry that exist outside time all at once, which is a contradiction, all at once already presupposes time, but bear with me.
Yeah, that I can work with,
Yeah.
because then it becomes understandable a bit.
Yeah. So we scan the tapestry of existence through a slit, and what follows we call the effect, and what comes before we call the cause. But there is only the tapestry with its intrinsic patterns and regularities.
Yeah.
Memory, because no process in nature is perfect, so neither is our slit. We are not always limited to this slit. No process in nature is perfect. So we can remember. We can see before the slit, or through a dimension of extension that is outside the slit. We call it memory.
Yeah.
For memory to be accessed, there is something about present states that need to be the case for you to be able to access a past state. And those are the memory pathways. Part of it looks like the hypothalamus. And whatever other present set of states is necessary for us to be able...
But your mind is literally, that stuck with me. You said like a couple minutes ago, your mind is literally traveling back.
Yeah. And that's not reliable, because every time you travel back, you build a new past. Because eventually you are remembering something, that remembrance itself becomes part of the past. So when you, suppose this is your first memory.
Yeah.
It's here. And then now you're a little bit further ahead.
Yeah.
And from here you remember that.
Yeah.
That experience of your memory now becomes a state here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you're here.
Yeah.
And you're trying to remember the state that was here, but you end up remembering your past recall. And when you remember, you also distort it with your current circumstances. You color your memories.
Yeah.
So that's why memory is not reliable. Because what are you remembering? Are you remembering the original state, or are you remembering the previous state of remembering plus everything that you
all those other
distorted
states
around it? You know?
But the mind is a mind traveling machine. And in image of it seems is that it's
The mind would be a time traveling machine if there really were such a thing as time. But time is a cognitive mechanism. Is something made up by the human. I mean, Kant and Schopenhauer already put this forward in the late 18th century. I mean, this is old as an idea. Time and space are dimensions of cognition. They are our cognitive way as dissociated authors of mind at large.
Great, Bernardo.
To organize our experience about the world. You see, that's what time and space are. So the mind is not traveling in time, because time only exists in
it's
us.
a construct of the mind.
It's not out there. We're not traveling in a dimension out there.
No.
We are just tricking the limitations that we impose on ourselves, because it's easier to survive if you organize your cognition in such a way that you can take small bites of what there is to know. Otherwise, you'd be overwhelmed and you wouldn't react to environmental challenges or opportunities.
Great. I'm not gonna sort of act as if I fully understand everything you say, but it's just for me like great stuff to dive into for all of you also. So, and I think some of you are a lot further than me, so you can follow.
Physics is getting here.
Yeah, that's
Loop quantum gravity and other
They-
grand unification theories that turn time into a relative thing, not a fundamental
exactly
scaffolding of
space-time.
nature.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of a trend right now,
Yeah.
right? It's
whole
also Donald
universe-
Hoffman saying space-time is dead, or
It's
yeah,
doomed.
it's doomed. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not doomed in the sense that we experience.
No,
this
exactly,
thing
but
we
it's not
call-
fundamental. It's
No,
not.
it's not.
It's very.
not. There is existence.
Yeah.
Everything else is how access to existence is managed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is no scaffolding of space-time out there.
Yeah, very
right?
interesting.
As a
And
fundamental
if
thing.
like just like stupid materialist question, because you worked at CERN, sort of having to sort of digest enormous amounts of data coming out of those accelerators, right? You build like how many terabytes? You said it once
It's
to me.
terabytes per second.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't store everything.
Yeah, but if you had to, if I'd say, okay, Bernarda, I want memory stored in the brain. We know the human brain is it possible from our birth of like 4-year-olds. I mean, when does it start with memory? Could it be done in a sense physically if we are looking for a processes that sort of could account for it? I know you don't believe it, but I mean, is it possible
Could
even?
be done. What exactly?
Storing all our memories. I mean, sort of the sense perception coming in. If the brain were a computer, could it sort of process all that data and store it somehow in our brains as a hard drive? I mean, physically,
I don't think
is
that's
it
how
possible?
memories work.
I know you don't, but I mean, if you are like a hardcore materialist still looking for memory in the brain, is it even possible within the laws of physics we know of?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, could this function as a carbon hard drive storing all the terabytes
Yeah,
from
it is
4-year-old to
conceivable.
now? It is, okay,
It is not
check.
physically
Impossible.
incoherent or physically impossible to say that there is enough state holding capacity in the anatomy and physiology of our brain
Okay.
to maintain states that correlate with everything you have experienced.
Okay.
We don't have high resolution experience. We only see high resolution about our thumbnail extended in front of us. The area of our nail is what we see in high resolution. Everything else is completely blurry.
Yeah.
We think we see in high resolution because our eyes are always scanning.
Yeah.
So we build this map through memory that gives us a high resolution image of what's around us. But that's an illusion. We see very little in high resolution.
Yeah.
Hearing sounds doesn't take much information at all. So there isn't much data to store. So it is not physically impossible that at a microscopic level, even at an atomic or subatomic level, it's not impossible. I cannot say that it's impossible for the brain, given its size and internal structure, to store the information of a lifetime. No, it's not impossible.
Okay.
But we've tried to find then where does it store, and we never find it. And in fact, memory is still there even after you cut off the head of a planaria.
So it's stored elsewhere. And then I guess also like a popular science or a popular culture question then of course is phenomena like precognition. People, I mean there are a lot of accounts, it's just sort of not popular and scientists don't want to burn their hands at it, but people knowing that tomorrow a plane will crash and they have like vivid sort of memories of what will happen, which is traumatic for them, and then it happens and they knew, right? And we don't have to say here that that's a phenomena that these cases are true or not, but I mean this mechanism you are describing could account for that, right?
Obviously access to past states is much easier than access to future states. Why that is so? Why is this asymmetry? I don't know. It would be pretentious for me to say that I can account for all of nature. The opinions I have, I hold because of evidence, not because I have a neat explanation of the why.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you why we have privileged access to the past and not to the future. I know that is so.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you a why. Having said that, it's if it is possible for us to access past states, then there should be no fundamental reason why we can't access future states. And in the history of culture, there is plenty of testimony that that is possible. It is unreliable, just as memories are unreliable.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not something you can bet on,
Yeah.
but sometimes it happens with overwhelming power, and it would be also silly to dismiss those accounts.
Yeah.
I have never had precognitive experience, so I can't tell you out of
Yeah.
personal insight that happens, but I'm not arrogant to the point of thinking that because I didn't have it, then everybody else is deluded. No,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah.
I'm old enough not to be this stupid.
But I like it because under idealism, it's just a phenomenon that could be scientifically studied, right? And that openness to me is like a large benefit of this paradigm.
Well, it has been scientifically studied, and the results are confounding.
Yeah.
Precognition has been studied under strict laboratory conditions, and there is an effect. It is small, but there is an effect, and it's usually associated with feeling. An experiment has been done several times, and the result is pretty reliable by now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are these people who are professional debunkers, so we try to debunk whatever,
Yeah.
because that's what they do. But the experiment is you are being shown pictures.
Yeah.
Some of these pictures are very emotionally distressing. Like, I saw a video the other day of a soldier stepping on a mine and his leg just vaporizes. So these are very emotionally strong and emotion-evoking images.
Yeah.
And volunteers are asked to sit and watch the images that are shown to them.
Yeah.
And they are instrumented with EEG cap to measure their brain activity. And it turns out that a measurable interval before an emotionally disturbing picture or video is shown, the brain activity associated with that emotion is already measurable. So it happens before you see the image. And this can be very accurately measured. And the effect is small, but it's not dismissible. There is an effect.
It's a little bit, I mean, I want to get to the little bit.
It's a little bit the other way around.
Yeah. I forgot the study, but I also, there's also one where people are, after they've given a test like this, I forgot the exact setup, but after they've given sort of images like that, they are primed afterwards, right? There are these psychological studies where you prime people. So you first prime them, for instance, that they have no free will, and then you let them do like a simple game and where they can cheat, and then some more people cheat. Well, we'll get to that later because that sort of has an immoral effect to tell people, so you prime them. But this study primed people like very stupid. Like first you have to do like a test and you get it. It's done, right? The study's done, it's finished. And then you prime them with like something afterwards and they measured an effect.
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right? Because then somehow the mind accessed that priming that happened after the test.
Yeah, and then we call it retrocausation.
Yeah, retrocausation,
Yeah, which is not incoherent, because causation is...
That's a tapestry again, right? It's that again. Really cool.
If you see the whole pattern, then there's no causation.
Yeah. Let's see. We are a lot of questions still. Let's see if you can speed up a bit, Bernardo. Michael Barker, 6460. And it's a long journey, a long question that sort of touched me in a sense because it's a personal story. He had a high-dose psychedelic trip and afterwards started to really understand Schopenhauer, Hegel, and thinking about the formless void, willing the world into existence, concept by concept. I'm not quoting the whole question, it's a bit too long. And then he moves on that he saw some deep truth in the Genesis story in the Bible. And somehow the universe sort of dividing itself, sort of falling out of Eden and our longing back for Eden. And he then asks, how do we rid ourselves of that experience of the serpent or Satan or sin? How do we get back to the innocent garden or heaven where the serpent isn't allowed and we feel at peace? Can we build our way back to God with more complicated things and ideas? So it's really reflecting, it's a very large story question, but it touched me in a sense because it's also my background and I know you and not literally, but you do see truth in biblical origin stories. So yeah, just from analytic idealism and your thinking, how do you reflect on the Genesis story and the fall into sin and our longing back to paradise?
You know how I interpret it. I think the fall is the fall into metacognition. It's when Adam and Eve realized that they were naked. Although they were already experiencing their nakedness before. It was going along all the while.
Yeah.
But then when they fell and they took a bite from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that's what the tree was called.
Yeah.
Then they knew that they were naked. In other words, it's the fall into metacognition. And suffering, psychological suffering, begins with metacognition.
Yeah.
Animals don't suffer. Animals are in the present. You know, if a vet has to amputate a leg of your cat comes back home and he's still springing around, he's still happy.
No trauma?
Well, there may be trauma related to the experience of the injury that led to
exactly.
a leg
The
amputation.
next time he sees the vet, he might sort of...
But he's not lying around thinking, oh, now I have only 3 legs. You know, the other cats have 4 legs. Oh, my life will never be the same again. No. They don't have that. Yeah. The cat just goes on living.
Yeah.
Because it's not metacognizing.
Yeah.
It's not turning into its own situation into a content of pondering. And you know, in the Bible, when the snake tells Eve about, you know, what would happen if she were to take a bite from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the snake says, and then you will be like God.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Well, what is the key capacity that God has? It's to create worlds.
Yeah.
Right? That's the key capacity. It's creation. So by taking a bite on the fruit of the tree of knowledge, you become metacognizant and you become like God. In other words, you can create worlds. You can create alternate realities.
Inner worlds.
That's the only world. These are the only worlds we have, inner worlds.
Through our thinking and thoughts and our metacognition, we create,
Yeah, so if we lose an arm, we are stuck into a world of our own creation in which we could have had both arms. And that's why we suffer. Because instead of being in the world like this, we are trying to be in the other world that we are creating, in which we have both arms.
But the serpent was then lying in your thinking, saying that then you can be like God, you can create, but God is not metacognitive, right, in your thinking?
Correct. God's creation is a spontaneous creation.
Yeah.
But a creature can only create through metacognition. You have to create an alternative world, because you're already part of the first. So to create now, you have to create an alternative.
Yeah.
And metacognition is essential for creating alternatives.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are in the present. You are in reality, in this creation. That's what's going on. And if you're not in pain right now, that's it. But metacognition allows you to access worlds in your own mind that you then compare to this world, and you feel bad about it. Now, it can go both ways. You can create fantastic worlds that drive you forward. You want to bring that dream into this world.
Which, I mean, culture,
We call it vision. People who are
vision,
visionaries,
exactly.
they create those worlds. But people who are regretful create alternative pasts that they compare to the real past, and that comparison is unfavorable, and that crushes them. You know, a world in which if I were a cat and I would have 3 legs,
all the lives you could have lived,
and what could have been if I hadn't lost my leg.
It's
you know? And so I think.
But you don't apply morality in the literal sense in those biblical stories, right? Because from my background, of course, God meant it for us to stay in Eden, and this shouldn't have happened. And then it was sort of we were punished. The metacognition was a punishment from God. Whereas I now think, no, it just is what it is. You know, it just happened. It's just nature. It just, or even think it had to happen somehow.
God winks throughout the Bible. Who put the snake in the garden?
Exactly. Yeah. Fallen. I mean, Satan was like a fallen angel, right?
Not only that, you know, if you don't want your kids to do something, what do? You say, don't do that. And that's exactly what your kids are going to go and do.
Yeah.
So when God tells Adam and Eve, you can do anything except take a bite of that fruit from that tree that I put bang in the middle and made it accessible to you. That you shall not do. Wink, wink.
Yeah, let's go. Let's hit the button and start the show. Because that's it. Let's start the show. And then we long back. There's also the thought I had personally that I sort of thought like, oh, this is like a deep poetic thought that I just think, reading a lot of quantum theory, thinking also about this Genesis story, it's like, also to me, like thinking about knowledge, the tree of knowledge, and then in quantum theory that, of course, it's a theory about what we can know about the world, and it was like Eve, but saved me is this complete nonsense I'm saying now, but as if Eve did a measurement, it was like from everything possible, she picked something, and then we came in this state, this fallen state, sort of just my... Am I onto something, or is this like nonsense?
No, no, I don't think it's nonsense. No, there are more religious passages in which there are uncanny similarities with quantum mechanics. St. Augustine is pretty good at this in his description of angels. It's like you're reading physics.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, in Citadel, what's his famous book, The City of God, or what's it again?
I don't remember.
The Augustine.
I think it's Augustine that I'm maybe wrong, because I'm not a
You need to
religious
look it
scholar.
up. Yeah,
but there are statements like God didn't only create the world. Creation is a continuous process. God has to continuously create the world, and if He stops doing it for a moment, the world disappears for a moment. Well, that's quantum physics and observation. If you don't observe, there's nothing there. So
exactly.
So there are uncanny things in religious literature. But you have to have the eyes to see. Because if you interpret it literally, you just flatten it, it becomes a caricature, it becomes silly. Which is, of course, what the atheists do. That's the way...
Yeah, exactly. They can shake hands with fundamentalists.
It's the same thing.
It's the same. You're doing the same coin. You're doing the same thing. And ever since we've met, and I've read your book More Than Allegory, it really opened my eyes to reading the Bible in this more deeper sense. And then there's just profound stuff in it. Yeah.
Oh, not only the Bible. I mean, the way... Christianity evolved into the 4th century, the idea of the Trinity, which cynical ones would say they just stole it from Hinduism, which has a Trinity.
Oh, check. I didn't even know. Okay.
Yeah, Hinduism has a Trinity. It has the Godhead, which is Brahman, and it has the Trinity, Vishnu, Krishna. No, Vishnu, Brahma. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But even in the later dogmas of the fathers of the church, there is amazing stuff, how one can be 3 at once. That's deep. And why 3? Why not 5? Why not 2? And there is deep psychological relevance to that. Jung has done an enormous study on this in different books like Ion. It's a book by Jung in which he explores this. So there is a lot of depth in religious literature. If you have the eyes to see, there's a lot there.
It's just great, and we should go into stuff like that deeper. And to just get back to this question from Michael, to just finish it, because there's also this question that longing back, you want back to paradise, and that's sort of in Christian thinking. A lot of Christian thinking does sort of see the world as fallen, and we want back to paradise or the new world. How do you think about that then? Is it even possible, or to lose metacognition, and is that a good state? Do you want to be there? Do you personally want to be there?
No.
No?
No, and I think a lot of what the West makes of Eastern non-duality is this attempt to get rid of metaconsciousness, to get rid of metacognition.
Through meditation even. Just stop it, just be here now. Yeah.
Be here now. Don't think about possible futures and don't think about the past. Be here now. It's a return to a kind of animal state. It's a return to paradise. And people want that because they want to stop suffering above all. Which is, and I don't say this pejoratively, it's just the correct word. It's a very egoistic thing to try.
Yeah.
Because you are suffering, then you make your life about you, And therefore, the goal is to stop suffering because you find it unpleasant.
Yeah.
Never mind what nature's trying to do through you.
Yeah.
It's about you. It's not about nature.
Yeah.
I gotta stop
Yeah.
suffering and I gotta go back to the garden. Well, obviously, God set up the situation that led to the fall because there was nobody else who could have set that up.
Yeah.
Right? So he was winking to himself and trying to help himself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we are doing, and it is a form of sacrifice. And it's not heroic, it's not even noble, because it's not like we were given a choice. We were just born and we suffer life stuff.
Yeah.
But that somehow does a service to nature. Through metacognitive eyes, through our metacognitive eyes, nature can regard itself from a perspective that would otherwise be completely impossible.
Yeah.
You have to leave paradise in order to know that paradise exists.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't even know that you're naked. You are naked, but you don't even know that.
Yeah.
So do you even know that you're happy? You don't. Right? You
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
know. You didn't
yeah.
know that you were naked.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
would you know
exactly.
that
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
happy?
Yeah.
So being exiled from the garden, in a sense, brings the garden into existence.
That's so deep. That's really deep. Never thought of it like that. That's really deep.
And I
And
think
it's just the incarnation of Christ that then just brings the longing back to the Father in a sense also then. Right?
But it's like the prodigal son. You come back, but with a different perspective, with a deeper perspective. You returned, but you returned a level higher
The spiral up.
in the spiral.
Yeah.
You're in the same place if you project down to the two dimensions.
Yeah.
But in the third one, you are higher. You have new eyes.
Yeah,
So-
and there was a feast, I mean, a banquet, right, in the story of the prodigal son. Of course.
Yeah.
And the older brother sort of like, oh, why we're
Why
feasting?
would you
Yeah,
do that?
He stayed in paradise. He did not. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And look, Christianity is, I have enormous respect for Eastern traditions.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I even tried to fancy myself as being part of that somehow because I thought that was superior. Now I don't think it's superior or inferior. I think the question is just senseless. They are just different things. But the Christian tradition has a depth that I find amazing. For instance, and that's New Testament stuff. In the Old Testament, there is a prefiguration of that in the book of Job. Job was a sacrifice. Job was sacrificed, but not as explicitly as Jesus was sacrificed.
Yeah, by God. I mean, Satan coming with that sort of challenge. You can challenge him.
Arguably, Job suffered more than Jesus.
That's true.
Jesus was
If you read the stories, it's true. It's true. This is like
Job suffered.
Oh yeah, but this is also this is blasphemy stuff. I mean, Christian people watching, is this guy saying that Job suffered more than Christ? But I mean, if you just read, we read the facts of the story.
Oh, he did.
But then, of course, the suffering that sort of theologians attribute to Christ is that he suffered from being apart from God, right? But that's a construct in a sense.
If you interpret it psychologically as an idealist, that's my tendency, because I think everything is psychological, so I try to interpret that psychologically. Job put a mirror in front of Job. Job put a mirror in front of God, the Godhead. Remember when Job finally meets God, and then God goes on a tirade, I am the force behind the storms, who do you think you are? And that whole tirade, what he's saying is, I am powerful, but I don't know what I'm doing. I am a force of nature. I am instinctive. No, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't weigh the consequences of what I'm doing. I'm just doing this. Right? I'm not metacognitive. I'm all powerful, but I'm not metacognitive. The way Jung put it, he said, God was omniscient, but couldn't consult his omniscience on demand. Which I thought is a brilliant way of putting that. And Job was the mirror. Job came back to God and showed him all of your spontaneous power. This is what it's leading to. A righteous human being is not suffering for no good reason. And that was the first confrontation between the lack of metacognition of God and the consequences of that. And that was a prefiguration of the incarnation. Because Jesus suffered. Jesus was a sacrifice, but he was God. God entered his own creation and suffered like Job.
Yeah, yeah,
So now God understood what the consequences were
yeah.
through a first-person perspective, not
Yeah.
a second-person
Yeah,
perspective
yeah,
of Job. Now God himself was in that cross, nailed to that
Yeah.
cross. And
And
I find that incredibly profound, because it's when the notion of sacrifice enters Western culture. And I consider it a profound notion. Life is sacrificial, not in a heroic or in a way that you can make a film of. That's not real. That's illusion. It's sacrificial in a deeper, real, pungent way, in the sense that your life's not about you, my life's not about me. In the same way that the blossom of my apple tree, the life of the blossom is not about the blossom. The blossom has to die for the apple to grow and for another apple tree to be produced.
Yeah.
If the blossom would make its life about itself, nature would grind to a halt. Nothing would progress.
Yeah.
Our lives are not about ourselves, have never been, will never be, and suffering arises from our insistence in making our lives about ourselves and putting on us the responsibility for being happy, which invariably fails. Of course it does. It's never been about you. How can you possibly expect that you get something that presupposes a falsehood? And only in Christian tradition is this idea of a sacrificial life built into the tradition very explicitly.
Yeah.
Other traditions emphasize other truths
Yeah.
that maybe the Christian tradition doesn't. But this notion of understanding that your life is not about you, which was part of Christianity, of the theory of Christianity, not the way the church employed it, because the priests made the life of everybody about them. But forget the institution. Just look at the philosophy, the idea of the spirituality behind that. This notion of a sacrificial life is incredibly rich and important, and we've lost it.
And I know the moment when we met, when I filmed you for a documentary for Dutch television, when we filmed in the Dom in Köln, which had sort of a deep meaning to you when you saw what's it again called? The crucifix there? The Three Kings, the Shrine of the Three Kings.
Yeah, above the Shrine of the Three Kings.
And you told me, and this is also in your book More Than Allegory, that we're all nailed to the cross of space and time, right?
We are all nailed to the cross.
Yeah, and it sort of dawned to me the depth of that, and that we are all in sort of that Christ position. And then in I think the Gospel of Thomas, so these are like apocryphal, how do you say that in English?
Apocryphal.
Apocryphal writings, right? The stuff, everything that got banned like for the 4th century.
It came a bit late, but yeah.
Exactly, we found it luckily, but I think Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, if you would know how to suffer, you wouldn't suffer as much as you suffer. And I think that's what you are referring to, right? If you can see the sacrificial purpose of your life and just sort of live it, there's suffering, there's going to be suffering. But there's more suffering if you think about it, and all those alternative lives you could have had without suffering.
We amplify the suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
You know how we amplify it? By convincing ourselves that we shouldn't be suffering.
Yeah, that's the thinking.
And it's that thought, I shouldn't be having this.
Yeah.
That's what destroys you. I had that when I got tinnitus for the second time. It worsened my tinnitus a lot, and I thought of suicide twice, very concretely. Somebody like me, I know exactly how to bring my life to an end.
Oh shit, Bernardo.
Quickly and painlessly with what is inside this house.
No, you mean that? Oh man.
For half an hour, I planned. Because I couldn't live with a dentist's drill, 2 of them inside my head 24 hours a day. But what I realized is that the brunt of that suffering was the narrative. If I hadn't been as stupid as to remove that siren from my wall myself, I wouldn't be in this position.
Yeah.
I didn't need to be in this position.
Yeah, that's what caused for people. That's what caused it, right? You had an alarm bell ringing and you removed it, which you shouldn't have done, and then it went off like louder and you got ear damaged.
Yeah, the security. I have a security system in the house, and several components, cameras, infrared, all this stuff, but there is an enormous siren
Yeah.
that is supposed to be so loud that whoever is trying to steal something just leaves. It does ear damage.
Yeah.
And the technician came, renewed everything, but forgot to remove the old siren. And I thought I'll just pull it out.
Yeah.
But those things have a safety mechanism. If you pull it out,
Then they
go off. And it went off just like this distance from my head.
No, yeah, it's instant damage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in that half hour of distress, when you were like really seriously considering to end your life, you realized this is a narrative, and
No, I wish the story was so romantic.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't that. No, I just didn't have guts. I didn't have, or, you know, I think the more realistic way to say is I didn't have the guts. I was a coward because I had decided at that moment that I didn't want this to go forward. You know, there is a danger to being an idealist, that the notion of annihilation is off the table. So although you value life more because of that, if life becomes unbearable, it's easier to pull the plug because you're exchanging an unbearable known for an unknown. Now, it could be worse, but probably it's better. You know what I mean? And that's the calculation.
Yeah, yeah.
And at that moment, I thought that's the correct calculation, but I didn't have the guts.
Yeah.
The realization that the brunt of that suffering was meta-suffering, that if I would just surrender and open up to the noise and accept it as a fact and understand that my life is not about me, has never been, and it will never be. The fact that I am suffering doesn't change the calculation of the worth of my life. Because it's not about my happiness.
Yeah.
So even if it becomes impossible for me to be happy, because I have 2 dentist drills inside my head constantly, it's not about it. It's not about my having fun, my being happy, my being comfortable. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And understanding this eliminates the meta-suffering and gives a level of peace that I didn't know existed. That voice in your head telling you everything you've done wrong, everything you regret. It
did that for you, that moment, on broader in your life. You just quit with that.
Yeah, and today I look back and the tinnitus episode was key to the storyline of my life. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be leading Essentia Foundation today.
That's beautiful, yeah.
Oh no, forget the potential beauty of it. It's a raw fact. You know how Essentia's foundation took place? It was on this very table in which we are. I was sitting over there. Fred Matzar was sitting where you were sitting. He came to visit me when I was in the throes of despair. And he had been asking me to leave my professional life. I used to work for ASML in the high-tech world, almost 25 years. And I didn't want to leave. It was my comfort zone. Everybody knew me, and I was good at what I did. I earned very well. And for 5 years, Fred was saying, you shouldn't be doing this. He had much more clarity about the direction of my life than I did. It's usually possible because when you are immersed in it, you don't see. Somebody who has the eyes to see and is outside can see that. So he saw that 5 years earlier, and for 5 years I was telling him, not yet, not yet, not yet. Then I was sitting there in the throes of despair, and then he asked me, I'm going to ask you the same question again. Now that you think you are completely incapacitated, because I had just shared with him the fact that I didn't think I could do my work anymore. Because I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't sleep, and my work was very intellectual. And then he said, now that your defenses are weakened. I was completely vulnerable, completely vulnerable. He said, given this, I believe you can be extraordinarily productive still. And I will bet on you. If you quit your career and you join me, we will create this foundation. And I will make this bet on you. Are you willing to do that? And he looked at me in the eye.
As Fred can do, he has these eyes,
Yeah. And then the tinnitus had disarmed me so completely that I just looked at Claudia, who was sitting next to me, because it was a decision that would affect her life as well, financially.
Yeah, of course, yeah,
it's not the same like I used to have.
Yeah.
I don't have big bonuses, and
Yeah.
a lot of stuff is gone. I looked at her, are you okay with it? And then she said, yes, I am okay with it. And then I told Fred on the spot, yes, let's do this. Had the accident not happened, if I didn't have tinnitus, I would be still armed, defending my comfort zone, and there would be no Essentia Foundation. But that's something you figure out only later. So today, that I still have the tinnitus. It's damaged. It's never going to go away.
Yeah.
But there are several days, many days, in which I don't even think about it. I only remember it the next day.
That's good to hear. Yeah, that's good
I hear it as I'm talking to you.
Yeah, we're now talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it fades away. Even though the volume is still loud, I don't think about it. And it doesn't set the tone of my life anymore. It has become insignificant for my mental inner life, even though the sound is still there. It's a very annoying sound. It's like the sound, it makes you contort your facial muscles like nails on a blackboard. In the first 6 months, I had a lot of facial cramps.
Because of it? Yeah,
because I was subconsciously doing this day and night. And I had tongue cramps.
And do you now sleep well?
I sleep wonderfully.
Oh, okay.
But the tinnitus is the last thing I hear before I fall asleep, and it's the first thing I hear when I wake up. Yeah. But I sleep wonderfully, and I don't have cramps anymore.
Yeah.
Tongue cramps, man, is one of the worst things.
Never had those. You can have those, tongue cramps.
Well, I never read about it, but I've had it.
Yeah, you've had it now,
Yeah, it's horribly painful, and it's not away. It's right on.
Yeah.
But I don't have it anymore. I don't have this muscle spasms anymore. Tinnitus is still there. It's my friend now. It's my new silence.
You look happy. You know, that's just.
I am very much in peace.
Yeah. And Bernardo, as we're now sort of, we have to finish. This is a long video for you guys, but there are timestamps, so just go back and forth what you like and don't like, and let us know that. Two more things. We have a cake, 10K subscriber cake waiting for us. So want to celebrate and eat that cake with you. But before we do that, I mean, what are you proud of now? Essentia is now 3 years up. I think, is it 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, a little more than 3 years. Yeah, it officially was founded in July 2020. But we became public only in January 2021. But we have existed for over 3 years now.
Yeah.
Proud, I've lost my capacity to feel proud. It doesn't happen anymore.
And this is not humble bragging, as they call it.
No, it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, check. And has the field shifted in a sense? Do you see sort of a momentum in society, academia, and the network we're in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in these 3 years? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we live too short lives to experience how fast and how profound some shifts are, because we only have a slight window to witness that. But in the ebb and flow of cultural history, we are at an inflection point. Two things will mark the next 2 decades. A shift to idealism, even if it doesn't go under this name.
Yeah.
There is an enormous effort to redefine the words matter and physicality in order to bring idealism under those 2 words.
Yeah.
There's a sense in which that will be a cop-out.
Yeah. This is also a bit classic Kuhn, right? This is like a paradigm, what happens when paradigms are starting to break down.
That people redefine words.
Exactly. You start playing around
it's pretty
with
dramatic.
Those. Yeah.
I had a private conversation with a very famous physicist whose name I will not mention, but we were discussing the new developments, the grand unification theories, loop quantum gravity and all that, and the understanding that reality is actually a pattern that can be mathematically described and that exists outside time. And everything else is a projection of that into extension. And I was making the claim that the only way a mathematical pattern can have ontological existence is in a mind.
Yeah.
Because that's where cognitive associations create mathematics.
It's the only mathematics we know of is in mind, right? So,
And this person said, no, shouldn't do that. It should be only math. And then I asked, but what is then the ontological essence of pure math, pure abstraction?
Yeah.
And then he said, why can't we just call it physical? And for him, this was just part of an insignificant statement of a much broader conversation that we were having at 2 a.m. For me, I stopped. When I heard that, it dawned on me, this is how this can unfold now. The culture may redefine the words matter and physical in such a way that it will have absolutely nothing to do with what the words mean today.
Yeah.
In order to be able to say, no, physicalism is still true. Except that it means something completely
different.
You make it unfalsifiable by word redefinition.
Yeah.
So that can play out as well. But
that will be a bit a hard one to swallow, right? For someone like you, it's been decades of work and thinking.
Well, so long as now I'm not married even to my name, let alone to the words people will use. So long as the understanding is there, I don't care about the words. My problem with this word redefinition is that I think it creates confusion.
Yeah.
It delays the actual understanding. It causes us to hold on to baggage that should be discarded. Because it makes no sense anymore. We shouldn't psychologically carry that along because we're using the same word. So I think it's unhelpful, but I'm not ultimately married to the word. If God would appear in front of me and say, we will use the same word, but everybody will understand what it would then mean, then I would say, no problem.
And Bernardo is matter.
and nobody will remember my name. I don't give a damn about that.
Okay,
that has disappeared from my life. But this will be one shift. With new words or the old words, this will be one shift before 2050.
Yeah.
The other shift, I don't know whether you want to.
I want to hear it. Yeah, I want to hear it. Yeah.
The other shift will be about non-human intelligence. That will be the other coin that would drop in the collective psyche of the culture, and that will be a vast. It will be perceived as a vast change before people understand that it's what has been going on all along. We just didn't talk about it before.
And what are we talking about then, Bernardo? Non-human intelligence. You're not talking
Literally
about AI.
That. No, non-human biological intelligence.
Yeah.
That will be the next coin.
Not UFO, alien stuff.
All that stuff.
All that stuff,
Yeah.
That is a great cliffhanger. That's a great cliffhanger. No more on that. There's a question actually. I think there was a question coming to you. This one might have been directed to me. A video on psychedelics where we refer to the psychedelic experience as a model collapse. And because as a filmmaker, I did a documentary on bacteria. It still has to come out. Was fascinated myself with sort of how bacteria are a dissociation in a sense, you could say, because they created a boundary, chemically speaking, fighting off entropy, and they kickstarted life on our planet. And then the yellow shuttle asked me, since life is dissociation in universal consciousness, do bacteria and viruses have inner life or the sense of being? If no, then how can the substrate, universal mind, have the sense of being? And if yes, is the sense of rock bottom being more close or akin to simple beings like single cells? So first you, Bernardo. I have my own thoughts on bacteria and consciousness, but what are your thoughts?
There is a significant difference between viruses and bacteria, or archaea, or fungi. They're all single cell organisms, but they're very different from viruses. Virologists usually refer to viruses as virus particles.
They're
In other
dead,
words,
right?
they're
Or
more
they-
mineral than they don't metabolize.
Yeah,
That's
check.
the key difference.
Yeah.
Bacteria metabolizes.
Yeah.
Archaea metabolize. Viruses do not metabolize. In order to reproduce, they need to hijack the metabolism of another organism. Otherwise, they cannot reproduce. I recognize that there is a gray area in between sophisticated viruses and very simple archaea or prokaryotes.
Yeah.
But I tend to think that viruses do not have, they are not what dissociation looks like.
Check.
They do not have private mental inner life.
Yeah.
They may reflect a configuration in the mentation of nature that is getting close to spinning off an altar.
Yeah.
It's getting close to that, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Because I think what an altar looks like is metabolism, and viruses don't metabolize.
Yeah.
Do bacteria have inner life? You bet. Actually, if you have a simple microscope at home and you watch a paramecium swimming in dirty water, it's very difficult to not conclude that that thing has mental inner life. It runs away from danger, it looks for food, and then sometimes it moves in a way that you can see it's cautious, it's being careful. Or sometimes it darts straight for food and then it gorges, just absorbs that food and it's
goes towards
fun.
oxygen, it will go towards oxygen away from acid.
So and even simple life forms are capable of having fun.
And did you know sort of the bacteria have a language, right? They communicate with each other through molecule secretion. And then there's a sort of a threshold level where they will start doing stuff together. And this is called quorum sensing. So they sense how large their group is to start doing stuff. So I think in some jellyfish to light up sort of bioluminescence, to do that process, it's triggered in some cases by bacteria. And they do so when they hit a threshold level and they communicate just through molecule secretion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
that's cool.
To make it more relatable to people, have you ever watched a spider weaving its web? It's amazing. It first climbs through several different branches to watch the space. And it's processing, it's planning, it's architecting where it's going to put the foundation threads to hold the web in place. And then it starts weaving. I mean, the brain of that thing, to see that, you need a microscope. And obviously has inner life. I have no problem at all extrapolating that down to archaea, not even simpler.
But inner life, like feelings, or like inner life, like
simple inner life.
Yeah.
But there is something it is like to be a bacterium or an archeon. There is something it is like to be them. They have private, conscious inner life, even though very, very simple.
And instinctive in a sense, because I think Nick Lane, the biologist who has written much about this, says that they sort of they can have states that sort of are stressed, or they know I'm in a good state. You know, bacteria know that. And it's by model building, but what I like about it, Bernardo, is that when you, and I will share this on our channel later. It's still sort of under copyright, or we have to wait sort of when the documentary releases, but we made a model of a molecular landscape of a bacterium, a single bacterium. It's just crazy, you know, there are 4 million proteins in one bacterium, and we visualized through animation 150,000, which took like a render time of months to just render through molecular Maya the motion of these things. And this is Brownian movement, right? So the slow down time, it's like just a construct in film, but slow down to nanoseconds to just show the movement of these proteins. But what it did with me is that you see, it's like when you said like computation is just water tubes, like filled with water or empty, right? And then, but only because it's in a microchip and we don't understand it, it becomes magic. And when seeing sort of the mechanism of a bacterium like this, we visualize it accurately as possible. Then for me, it was like, this cannot be it. This is us, you know, but it's just these particles. I saw the model of it, you know. I don't know how to explain it to you, but do you understand what I tried to convey? That sort of, I got down to sort of the simplest form of life, and I just could not see how consciousness could be caused by it. I could see.
Oh,
okay,
no, I can't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because I saw the tubes, I saw the computation, I saw our model of the bacterium is that we know we have these proteins, we know how they interact, and we know what the bacterium then does. But when you then visualize and you see it in front of your eyes, and then to think it generates consciousness.
It's totally logical.
I could not wrap my arm around it. But somehow, because of our brain, it's so complex, then we can start believing it. But I think also for idealism,
We
it's
hide
nice
the
to...
bullshit behind complexity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we give it legitimacy because it's hidden behind complexity.
Yeah, and then
But if you open the doors and you see the bullshit, then it's just bullshit.
you go down to the cell level, you go down to your cells, you know, your mitochondria, and you see the machinery of it, because it's just our models of what's happening as machines, you know, molecular machines. And then it becomes evident that it's impossible that can create consciousness, or at least to me, it's
No,
personal.
it can't. But there are still puzzling things, even if you bring down this machine model all the way down, there are still puzzling things. The model you made, for instance, doesn't use first principles, doesn't use the basic laws of quantum field theory.
No, of course
Because
not.
otherwise
Yeah.
you cannot compute even one protein strand,
Yeah.
let alone millions in one bacteria.
Yeah.
So we are already making enormous simplifications to do even that.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you're
true,
describing.
true.
And then even then, there are things that a real life bacterium does, like protein folding. And it does that in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It takes our computers days
Yeah.
to figure out how that protein will fold. We don't know
Yeah.
how that mechanism does that,
Yeah.
which suggests that if that mechanism is simply an appearance of consciousness, then there are capabilities inherent in consciousness that we cannot capture in computational models. We just cannot do it anywhere near fast enough
Yeah.
in order to be as fast as...
Yeah, and the
that thing.
self-replication, of course, of the cells. That's also it's crazy.
That's more computable.
You think?
Yeah. When you have one DNA strand, divide from the other, and then use as a template to copy new ones. So you have mitosis. That's better computable. But when you go to really submolecular levels, it becomes very difficult.
What happens there? Yeah.
The computability of that is not clear at all. We may never have the computational power on this planet to model one bacterium from first principles all the way up.
Yeah.
Because it's an explosion of exponential complexity.
Yeah.
And yet nature does it just
Like that, yeah. And we still don't have a clue of how the first bacterium... I mean, Bruce Damer is working on this, you know...
That's
him-
advancement. The work
It's
of
advanced.
him and his team is an advancement.
But he still calls it like a leap. It's like a gap. It's still an enormous gap. The first protocells to a bacterium, it's still, for him also, it's still...
He made it more plausible with the idea of communities, such that when one of those protocells dies, the state that it represents is not lost because it's sort of preserved in the community. And that solves a key problem, because the key problem of abiogenesis is even if by chance you get all the complexity of a full bacterium, which is already unbelievable enough, but you get all that complexity, but you miss the ability to reproduce, then that will eventually die, and all that state is lost.
Yeah.
Now you have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's the key problem. And Bruce's and his colleagues,
how do you
the idea
conserve...
of communities is that the community preserves the state. So you get more time to get it more sophisticated, more sophisticated.
Is that through gene swapping? No, that's already when a bacterium is...
No, I would have to reread it and
we're
look
off,
it up
we're
again.
off our charge. But but to get back to sort of the more philosophical question here, would it be more close to a rock bottom of being, or like a very pure form of consciousness, if you say like it presents itself to us, the dissociation process as metabolism, and this is the most simple form of metabolism, so it's the most simple form of dissociation, alterness, alter.
With very little mental contents within the dissociative.
But already metacognitive?
No.
But where do you then draw that line? I mean, when does that start? You don't have like a threshold in your theory or thinking?
Humans clearly are metacognitive.
Of course.
There is some evidence that some pachyderms can be metacognitive. Elephants,
Pigs, perhaps, or
maybe cetaceans, whales, dolphins, some mollusks, octopuses. But even then, their degree of metaconsciousness is nowhere near ours.
Yeah.
When you become really metaconscious, you unplug from instinct. You are no longer connected to the web of instinct that makes everything balanced.
Yeah.
You are exiled from the garden.
Yeah, and by that you mean more concretely that you wouldn't sort of take your part in normal life anymore, right? Like where animals sort of, they're distressed still sort of.
Well, it means that your choices are no longer spontaneous choices.
Yeah.
Your choices are now deliberate. You deliberate your choices. Should I do this? Should I do that? You now recognize yourself as a subject in some ways separate from the rest of the world. And you begin to ponder in those terms. I am a subject and there is the rest of the world. They are not me. The moment that split happens, you're exiled from paradise, and your choices are no longer instinctual choices. They are now deliberate, and they aim to maximize some objective or cost function of your ego self.
Yeah, yeah.
We start thinking it through instead of just acting.
Yeah.
Because animals' instinct always presents them with one clear, unambiguous option for every situation. They don't hesitate.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Animals act. Then
There's this funny, it makes me think of a funny anecdote. Yeah, my favorite filmmaker is Werner Herzog, and he has this documentary going to the science community on the North Pole or whatever. And then at the beginning of the film, he says that he has his own questions, and then he shows like there's this painting of a monkey riding a goat, and then he says, I ask myself why monkeys didn't start domesticating other animals to chase and find the bad guys, and it makes me think of that, because that's like what we do, right? Sort of we start building models and deliberately thinking good, bad, and setting up systems.
Value judgments.
Exactly.
Fictions.
There's no lion that sort of cannot sleep at night because
there's no spontaneity.
Because he killed another animal. Or other animals thinking what you were doing is so wrong. Great.
But I think nature is as spontaneous as anarchia, in the sense that what it does is always spontaneous, and there is always one clear choice. There is no deliberation. There is no hesitation. How do we know that? The laws of physics don't fail. Nature behaves in very regular, predictable ways, and it doesn't hesitate. If I'm holding my phone and I'm about to drop it, when I open my hand, the phone doesn't hesitate. The phone doesn't hang in the air thinking, should I fall?
I'm suffering.
Should I stay here? Should I go? The phone just falls. So on that basis, and I mean, I'm half joking, but the example is real. Phones don't hesitate when they are released. They fall. Stuff falls. Electromagnetic fields pop up when you pass current through a wire. They don't hesitate. It doesn't take them a while to think, should we come up? Or no, they are there. Nature is spontaneous, like an archaeon, like a bacterium. Instinct provides one answer for every question. It's unambiguous. And then it just happens without hesitation. So does nature have a sense of being? Yes, but not a metacognitive one. I don't think nature is sitting there thinking, I am. No. It just
that's
is.
A human thing.
And it just does its stuff.
Yeah. There's this funny thing, thinking about bacteria, but it's a bit sort of thinking along another line, is that if you think about dualistically and good and bad and stuff like that, I mean, those bacteria are fighting like a world war right now on the surface of our skin, and it's just colonies fighting to colonize our gut, and pathogens and everything that's happening, but it's all contributing to this larger system, me sitting here and I'm feeling just fine, and just that somehow helps me also looking at human suffering. In a sense, if you could identify if you say sort of when I let go of those metacognitive thoughts about suffering and it makes me suffer less, it's also identifying with the larger whole you are a part of, right, in a sense. And if bacteria could have the could sort of consciously think, but I'm contributing to this larger system that I cannot see, but I'm part of it, and the suffering would be less, perhaps.
The bacteria knows that instinctively because it's not pondering.
Yeah.
It's operating according to instinct. And instinct is this...
Yeah. But you understand what I'm trying to convey here?
Yeah. I think the ideal state would be one in which we are metaconscious, because the price we pay for metaconsciousness is egotism.
Yeah.
Because we recognize ourselves as individual subjects, and that helps a lot, because now we can ponder things, we can reflect about the great questions of life, we can inspect the contents of our own minds and gain insight about ourselves. All of that is made possible by a recognition of ourselves as individual subjects. If you don't recognize yourself as distinct from what else is going on, there is no... you cannot ponder the great questions of life. You are like a leaf on a tsunami. You go for the ride. And the only way you can stick your head out of the tsunami and take account of what's happening is through metaconsciousness, metacognition. But that leads to egotism, because now you recognize yourself as an individual distinct from the rest. And that leads to wars and all the crap. The ideal state would be one where there is metaconsciousness, but there is also the understanding that our lives are not about us, have never been, will never be, cannot ever be, because that harmonizes us back with the rest of nature. We are not separate from nature. We are something nature is doing. We are not just here watching. The watcher is the doing of what is being watched.
Come again?
The watcher is a behavior, a doing of what is being watched. And understanding that is the end of egotism, but preserving metacognition. And this race is what defines whether this race between increasing metacognition, but also the understanding that life is sacrificial, it's not about us. Who wins this race determines whether our civilization comes to an end or not. If egotism grows out of hand with the understanding that Christianity originally tried to bring about, we will kill each other in a nuclear war. But if that understanding, which is a metacognitive understanding, the understanding that your life is not about you, is a completely metacognitive understanding. If that understanding wins the race, we survive as a civilization.
We have hope.
The planet survives anyway. Even after we destroy it, give it a million
that's
years
the beauty.
and it's a
I
garden.
think, Bernardo, I think that's the beauty. I think that's what we need to, can be our little contribution, right, from the Essentia Foundation. That is what it's about, because that's what idealism can offer you, to sort of that insight.
But notice the magnitude of the challenge. The entire industry and philosophy of self-help in the West is completely based on the notion that your life's about you and you should take the reins of your life. You should take control of your life. And if you do that, you can do anything. It's the foundation of the Western sense of well-being in the 21st century.
There is a resurgence of Stoicism, right, that sort of does want people to recognize that don't worry what you cannot have influence over and stuff like that. But to me, that's instrumental in a sense, right? It's not sort of
it goes beyond the mark, because to recognize that your life is not about you is not to say that your life is meaningless. The blossom of the apple tree, its life is not about it, it's about the apple. But without the blossom, there is no apple, and there is no next apple tree. So the fact that our lives are not about us does not entail or imply that our lives are meaningless. I happen to think they're extremely meaningful, precisely because they are not about us, precisely because they are about something much bigger than us. And Stoicism fails to recognize this latter part, that life is meaningful. Stoicism is like throwing your arms up and whatever, it is
and
what it is.
You now see I'll comment on videos like that later on. You see like popular channels sort of like coming up with these stories that it's all meaningless, but that's, but isn't that beautiful? Because now you can give me, but you know what I mean, you know, that's sort of a popular cultural narrative to then sort of see the meaning. And that for me is also it's a surface understanding, but like existentialism, like the French philosophers after the Second World War, it's stuff like I liked it when I left Christianity as sort of a doekje voor het bloeden, we say in Dutch. You know what that expression means, right? It's just to sort of like it's just to reduce your pain because it's the metaphysical a bandage for your metaphysical loss. But when you then when I sort of got familiar with idealism, I saw it's just like a placebo, or it's a what is it?
No,
not even a placebo. It's a
people are handed a lemon. They try to make lemonade.
Yeah.
It's very human, but it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
No, you can have oranges. You don't need lemons.
Yeah. And we can have, to conclude this video, we can have our 10K subscriber cake, which I brought along, but I had it frozen, and we had to postpone this video because I had a flu last week, so it's not in its best shape. But let's try it anyway,
let's
right?
get the cake.
Yes, so here we are. Here's the 10K subscriber cake. I don't know if it's... Can we see it, Max? Is that okay? Okay, cool. Yeah, like I said, it has been a week in the freezer, so the 10K. But it isn't right anyway. It should say 10,400 already. So thanks so much for subscribing to our channel. And by doing videos like these, we just hope to grow it and comment and ask us questions and make suggestions for future videos. And Bernardo and I am now going to eat this 10K subscriber cake.
I thought you would have brought Limburgse Vlaai.
Would you have liked that better?
No,
they didn't have footprints. Yeah, Limburgse Vlaai is more Dutch. This is like more a normal...
This is American.
Yeah, this is American cake. To wrap this very long conversation with Bernardo up, I just want to say really thanks for helping us grow this channel for the last couple of years. And we are just looking very much forward to growing the channel with your help. So give us all the feedback that you think is useful for us, suggestions, questions. We will do this more regularly, right, Bernardo? So just thanks. And yeah, are we going to eat a 10 times as big a cake in a year time? I say let's...
100,000.
100,000. If I can order a bigger cake, then 10 times as big. Okay, that's sad here. Thank you.